Ann here from Backroad Buddies, and the video we want to share with you today is about trip planning. We're currently in our 5th season of travel, so we travel about 6 months out of every year, and we've already actually started planning ahead for season 6 and 7. So we've kind of developed a routine on how to plan out these trips. So we normally spend the 6 months we're at home planning out the trip, and we've kind of broken it down into steps, into 15 steps. So we'd like to share that with you in the hopes that you can pick up a few tidbits that maybe help in your long trip planning as well. So step 1 is come up with an overarching theme or main goal for the trip. So for us, season 1, which we called crisscrossing the country, we kind of followed our daughter around on the drum corps circuit. So that was kind of not as hard of planning. And then 2, because COVID hit, we just kind of made little circles around Colorado. So that was kind of the theme. So we called that Colorado in depth. And then season 3 was make Maine by fall. Season 4 was Alaska bound. This season is southern states. Next season will be the West Coast, and then the season after that will be Europe. Step 2 is decide on a rough route. For this step, we usually look at a big map and kind of see what fits our theme, and keep in mind the time of year and possibly the weather. So for like making Maine, and this is a lot of hand waving, so just a big general route. So from home, we decided to go north, go through the UP, visit relatives in Ohio, and make it up to Maine. And then, so we were hoping to make there by peak, fall, and then follow the fall colors down the Appalachian Mountains before coming back. So kind of a big loop. For next year in the West Coast, we're planning on doing heading over to Southern California in the spring, and then as the summer wears on and gets warm, we head up north, and then we come back down again in the fall. So kind of keeping weather in mind when we do that. Step 3 is make a wish list of things you want to see and do in each state. So once you've determined your general route, you kind of know what states you're going through, and that's when we start trying to come up with what we want to do in each one of those. So things we normally look at are national parks, state parks, and then and sometimes if we'll look at all trails to see kind of what nice hikes are around in that state, and a website we have a tendency to end up a lot at is called planetware.com. Now, I don't know how Planetware comes up with these lists, but they usually have a list for each state. So this is like the 17 top rated tourist attractions in California, and we usually like a lot of things that they have listed in there. Usually it includes national parks and just some wonderful ideas to go through. It doesn't mean we'll go to all of them, but just ones that we look through them, they have a little description of them, like, oh, that sounds interesting, I want to do that. So then we come up with our wish list. So we'll put, a nice wish list of, oh, let's try to work in these items here. Another source that we would go to, and it depends on where we're going. So for Alaska, we use the milepost a lot. So that was a good resource for ideas. For our Europe trip, we like the Rick Steves travel guides, so we've been going through those for our Europe trip in 2025. Step 4 is to make a Google My Map from the wish list. Now, if you've never used Google My Map, it's a great tool for visualizing where things are located within the state. So, see how strong my cell service is right here. So if you just search on My Map, and it's Google My Maps, you can create a new map. So let's do that. Hopefully this won't go too slowly. So there's a thing over here to the left that says import, and we're going to import that wish list. So let's see if so we've got this California wish list, and we're going to, we only have one column there, so it's asking, you know, which way to title it, on which column. If you have a spreadsheet and it has multiple tabs, you have to make sure that the tab that you want to pull in is all the way to the left. So it's basically the first tab in the spreadsheet. So as you can see here, all of those items that were in our spreadsheet, I was thinking it would show it to us here, but anyway, is now showing up on the map here. So, and if you hover over it, you can see, oh, that's Joshua Tree. This is Death Valley. So we can see them all on a map, and what this helps us do is visualize a route. So in this case, we're going to be coming in from the east from Colorado, and we're going to want to head north, up, and then come back in. So we kind of, so you can kind of see, well, let's pick up these items maybe on the way up, and then on the way back we'll come down and hit these along the coast, and then back across. So it just helps visualize where everything is, and so you can kind of start planning out a route, or maybe grouping things together is like, oh, we can see the aerial tramway maybe as we're coming out of Joshua Tree over here, because they're pretty close together. And then these are out on the islands and hard to get to, so we actually eliminated that from our list. So it just helps visualize where everything is. So step 5 is identify the order of the items within each state. Yeah, so this item I kind of alluded to before. You can kind of see where everything is, start, you know, thinking what order you're going to do things in, keeping in mind where you're going to enter the state, where you're going to exit the state, depending on your overall plan of your large route. You know, so it may be, you know, you may be making somewhat of a straight line through a state, you may be making a loop through a state. It all depends on how it fits into your overall route. And then, you know, things close together, you might be able to stay in one spot, visit 2 things. But yeah, just kind of figure out which items you're going to have in your itinerary and what order they're going to be in. Step 6 is to start a complete itinerary list in a spreadsheet. So now that we kind of have a list of, and the order of we're going to see things in each state, we put it all together in a spreadsheet for all the states that we're going to. Oops. And just kind of list them out in order for the whole route. Step 7 is to refine the itinerary by looking at the distances between the different destinations in our list. So to help us determine the distances between each of our items in our list, we actually add 2 more columns here. So we add one that says miles from the previous location. So it's 993 miles from Joshua Tree back to our home, which hours driving is 14.7. Now these are formulas that we use, and so it calculates it from Google APIs, and it's actually some app script that we picked up off the internet. So this is kind of what it looks like, the app script, and I'll put a link to a sample spreadsheet so you can pick up that those app scripts and be able to use those. But those are real helpful, so I don't have to sit there and map it all out and go in and calculate these myself. It just basically does it for me, and if I change the order around or something, I can just redistribute those formulas and it'll calculate it for me. So that's really nice. So as we look here, we see, 14 hours and even 7.6. That's more than we normally like to drive. We normally like to limit our drive times to 4 hours or less. Sometimes we'll go a little bit more, maybe 5, 6, probably max. So that's usually about 250 miles. So we have some work to do here. We need to make some stops before we get to Joshua Tree, obviously. And so we'll use those to help refine this itinerary of how we're going to lay that out. Step 8 is to start setting dates for each destination. Now this one can get a little tricky. You need to look at certain destinations to see if there's a certain time you need to be, a certain day you need to be at a location. So if you're doing something like the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta, well, those are set dates. So set those first and kind of work in both directions out from there. So we start adding the dates to our spreadsheet. We add the arrival date for each location, and then we actually use a formula. It's just a subtraction between two dates to see how many nights we're going to stay. We had been having a rule of we normally stay a minimum of 2 nights in a location, and so we don't have 2 travel days in a row. We kind of like that, but lately we've been actually slowing it down to averaging more like 3 or 4. So there's even some 5s in here, but keep in mind where much time you want to spend in a location. So things like national parks, especially big ones like Sequoia and Kings Canyon, we want to allow more time to go on some more hikes. And whereas this Grand Junction, where it's really kind of, we've been there before, we're just kind of stopping there so we can break up the drive. So that's why that's 2 nights. But yeah, just start playing with that, laying it out. You may have to work with it a while because it's like, oh, I want to spend all these nights here, and then you get to the end, like, oh, we're like way, way too far in the year. We need to shorten that up. So it gets to be a little bit of a game, but you can kind of work through that. Making sure you take advantage of formulas. Of course, if you move things around, then you have to repopulate those formulas so they're calculating on the right rows. But that's kind of what we do in that step. Step 9 is define places to stay at each of the locations. So normally when we're looking for campgrounds in an area, we'll search in a website called Campendium. There's also an app for your phone. And typically places we like to stay are usually the green ones, because usually that indicates government campgrounds. So it would be national parks, state parks, Forest Service. So those are usually the places we like to stay because usually they're cheaper, the locations are nicer, the sites are spread out. And if we know we're not going to need air conditioning, we don't need electrical hookups. And we generally don't even need water and sewer hookups as long as periodically we can find a place to dump our tanks and fill our fresh water. And so we normally can get by between our solar and our alternator that recharge our batteries, so we don't normally need to hook up unless we need to run our air conditioner. So that's kind of how we search. Now some locations we do end up at private campgrounds. Those are usually more expensive. They're usually packed in tighter, but we do use those as well. So we add a column to our spreadsheet with the camp location for once we've kind of identified where we want to stay. Step 10 is research when each of those camping locations open up for taking reservations. Now, some people don't make reservations. We have a tendency to make them in advance because I'd rather spend the time when I'm home during the winter making all those reservations than doing it while we're on the road, running the risk of having a campground full when we show up. So we like to do in advance. That doesn't mean that all the places we stay take reservations. We do stay at places that are first come, first serve. But we make a note of that, and we know that we need to show up early at those places. But it's always gives us a little more ease of mind when we're on the road that we know where we're going to stay for the night. Like, oh, we have a reservation, we can show up late if we need to. And so it just, to us, gives us more freedom and relaxation while we're on the road. So here you can see we've added another column to our spreadsheet that has reservation info. So we're like, oh, this one opens up 6 months in advance, which means for us on the date that we want it, on May 1st, we need to make a reservations on November 1st, or we can make a reservation on November 1st. And we just put all those notes in there of when everything opens up, and any other notes that information that we find in that research. Step 11 is to set calendar reminders of when to make those campground reservations. So once we know when reservations open up, we set calendar reminders, and you see it's, at least in the winter, there's quite a few of them because they open up at different times. So I want something that'll remind me, so not only do I get a pop-up when I'm on Google, I'll also get an email the day before. So especially there are some popular campgrounds that fill up in a matter of minutes or even seconds. So you want to know, hey, at 9 a.m. I need to be, in there clicking the buttons if I want to get into that campground. And we just find that leaves more options open, because if you wait till later, then you're just have to search around and find who has openings, and we just rather have the possibility of getting our first choices in areas. There's usually, if you get closed out of somewhere, there's usually somewhere else close by, and it may not be your top choice, but usually you can find something. So this isn't a requirement, but it just lets us kind of get into the places that we really want to get into. Step 12 is actually making those campground reservations. So as we make the reservations, we actually add that information to our reservation info column. So you can see, site number. We actually put how much it cost, how much we have paid if we put a deposit down. So when we get there, we're like, oh, we got a balance due. So whatever information, like here, we needed to get a parking permit for the state park as well as the campground. This one we didn't need one, but just information like that we'll add to here. Step 13 is consider reservations for excursions and attractions. Now this is a step we need to get better at, because we have a tendency to only make campground reservations ahead of time before the season starts, and then what we're going to see and do actually, and what our days look like, we kind of plan that out as we go along on the road. However, that we've missed out on some opportunities that way. Some of the big things, like there was Taliesin West, we wanted to do the guided tour. Well, by the time we looked for tickets, it was too late. That was already booked up. So kind of looking ahead and maybe looking into, is this something, if you want to do something like the Antelope Canyon tour, how much in advance do you really need to make those reservations? So that's kind of some advice that you might want to look ahead and do, and not wait till the last minute. Otherwise you may miss out on some opportunities. So we add some more columns to our spreadsheet, what the excursion is, how much it cost, and we'll also kind of add, let's see, there's some more columns. So we'll kind of add that on kind of our activities. We'll put another column here just to kind of, oh, this is a driving day. Here are some things that we might want to do. And here I have noted in green, yeah, we have a reservation here that we need to, be there by 1:30, little notes like that so we don't miss out on things that we've already paid for. Step 14 is plan laundry stops. So again, laundry is something we'll add to our activity column here. So usually if I just said laundry, then that means there's laundry at the campground. We generally prefer to do that. Other people prefer going to a laundromat, but we just find it convenient to do at the campground. We don't have to pack up and leave. It's usually cheaper. It's not always the best facilities, but we prefer the convenience. So we generally travel with about 10 to 14 days worth of clothing, so we can go that far. So if you know to go, oh, okay, we've got laundry here, we've got laundry at this campground, but then if we keep going here, oh, we need to go find a laundromat in Phoenix because this campground does not have laundry. This kind of helps plan it. Doesn't mean that we always follow this to a schedule, but it kind of gives us a heads up. It's like, hey, there's laundry at this campground, but there's not at the next, 2 or 3. Is there a town nearby where we can find a laundromat? We may be in some remote locations, so we need to kind of time things accordingly and not be stuck way out remote and have to, kind of make a long trip to a laundromat just because we don't have any more clean clothes to wear. And finally, the last step, step 15, is just add any additional information to the spreadsheet as you need it. Ideas of what to do, reminders of whatever you need to be doing. So just whatever you feel like adding to that, it's all in one place. As you can tell, that's kind of our master itinerary. We share that with our 2 adult children so they know where we're expected to be. And if we need to make any changes to it while we're on the road, we'll update the spreadsheet and notify our kids and let them know. So that's kind of the master plan, if you want to call it that. The other thing to pay attention to is making that spreadsheet available offline, because there are times when we don't have cell service. We use Google Sheets, so in here there's a here it says remove offline access, but if you haven't given it already, it says allow offline access, and that just means that I can open that. It saves a copy on my laptop, so if I need to access it when I don't have a cell service, I can still get to the information, and I can make changes to it as well, and as soon as I get cell service again, it will sync that back up with what's online. So we kind of add all kinds of things. We added a column here, what the cost per night is. Oh, the other thing for offline, these formulas that calculate the driving miles and driving hours, every time you open the spreadsheet, it actually tries to go out to those Google APIs and recalculate. So if you're not connected to a cell service, then you won't be able to see these values because it'll just say loading because it's trying to recalculate. So what we do is we actually copy those. So if you do, do the whole, both of those columns, and then do a, oops, I didn't actually copy it though. And then do a copy, and then do a paste special values only. Then it'll just copy the value over and not the formula. So then you have those numbers available to you when you are offline. So that's really helpful. As you notice, I kind of color code things. Usually once a reservation's made, I turn it green. Once the payment's cleared through, I turn that green. If anything that I need to kind of draw to my attention that I need to take action on, I put in red. So that's kind of how all of that works. And again, I'll have a link to a sample one of these so you can see our formulas. If you go over to our related blog post, it'll be in there. Thanks for watching, and if you want more details, look in the description below for a link to our related blog post, so check that out. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Ta-ta for now.